What is your name and what culture are you representing?
So my name is Muhammad Alwan, and my culture is of the Indonesian culture. That's the one that we're representing right now.
How would you communicate to someone older than you in your culture?
I would actually call them a variation of the word uncle, depending on how old they are relative to my parents. So for example, there's two words for uncle. It's and ua. So is for someone who's older than you, but also younger than your parents, and then ua is for someone who's older than you and older than your parents. And that also applies to the female gender too.
How would you communicate to someone a different gender than you in your culture?
So growing up in Indonesia, I was kind of taught it's just treat them equally. That's kind of the move now, I guess. Treat them all equally and don't really have any differences from just treating them. But the way I grew up, it's like you kind of treat, especially women, as, I guess, not really fragile, but with more respect and more sensitivity compared to males.
What's something that you think is unique about communication and etiquette in your culture?
We don't really have, grammatically, we don't have formal words to show, like when you're talking to someone older than you. It's just something that's been kind of improvised compared to some languages where there's specific words that you say when you're talking to someone who's older than you. We don't have that. We don't say sir, we don't say ma'am or whatnot. We just kind of improvise it. Yeah, that's about it.
How much space would you typically leave between yourself and a colleague in a professional setting?
Like physical space, sir?
Yes.
Physical space? Depends on the context, but we're very touchy. Like when we greet, we would kiss each other's cheeks or whatever. So we're very close physically, but in an office environment, it would be similar to what an American office environment is.
What is your name and what culture are you representing?
I'm Manan Mendirata, and I'm from India, so I'll be representing Hindu culture.
How would you communicate to someone older than you in your culture?
So in our culture, basically communicating with others, like in the language that I speak, which is Hindi, we usually use the word aap to communicate with someone older and tu to communicate with someone younger.
How would you communicate to someone a different gender than you in your culture?
Talking with other genders is basically the same as how we do in America. So it's really not that different how you would communicate with the same gender.
What's something that you think is unique about communication and etiquette in your culture?
We try to give respect to anyone who's older. So anyone who's older than you, you'll call uncle or basically give them respect and call them aap instead of calling them by their first name.
What are some things we do in America that would be offensive in your culture? What makes them offensive?
In India, we usually try to give respect to older people, and in America, it is very common to call elders by their first names. While in India, if you would call someone who's considerably older than you by their first name, or even their last name, and not put an uncle or something in front of the name, that would be considered offensive, because it is very important in our culture to give respect to the elderly.
What is your name and what culture are you representing?
My name is Rebecca and I'm from Aberdeen, Scotland.
How would you communicate to someone older than you in your culture?
Just the same as American people would refer to someone older than them. We don't use ma'am and sir, but maybe Mr. and Mrs. And if it's our friends' parents, then just their name, not sir or ma'am.
How would you communicate with someone a different gender than you in your culture?
The exact same as American culture. Yeah.
What's something that you think is unique about communication and etiquette in your culture?
So the town that I'm from, we have our own dialect called Doric, and so it's almost our own language that older generations use. And each town in Scotland has its own dialect. So for an outsider, an English person looking in, or another citizen of another country looking in, it's quite different.
That's really cool.
That's the communication aspect, but etiquette, I know we hold our cutlery different ways. We don't stab the food, we kind of cut it. But yeah, the etiquette's almost the same.
How much space would you typically leave between yourself and a colleague in a professional setting?
So Scottish people love their space and British people love their space. So like very far apart. Like boundaries are like very important.